Simon Weakley has been with Dale Carnegie for over 20 years, so that's a long time, and is the Director of Training and Sales. He's a senior trainer, having trained over 4,000 people through the world-famous Dale Carnegie Programme, and delivers the corporate product suite of programs to some of New Zealand's top 10 companies. So Simon's passion for people and being of service to them is deep within the DNA, and his enthusiasm for bringing others has led him to commit his time to several boards. So outside of Dale Carnegie, Simon runs his own successful business, as well as promoting support for youth employment direct to business. So welcome, Simon. And yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks, Alfredo. Good evening, team. Hope we're all well. Just bear with me a second. I'm just going to share a screen. You may all disappear from my screen. I'll try and bring you back. There we go. All right, so we all got our screen in front of us. All see this? Give me a thumbs up if we can see.
Yep.
Epic. We're all on track. So thanks, Alfredo. As Alfredo said, my name's Simon Weakley. And I've just put together some information for us just to start thinking a little bit about this topic about culture, about well-being, how it all comes together. But a little bit of background before we kick off, a little bit about Dale Carnegie, who we are. So we've been around for a little while, 110 years to be exact. This is the 110th year. And we've been ISO certified as a training organization since 1998. We're one of the very few that actually bother going down the ISO track, which means we get ourselves independently certified and assessed. Popped up here just a little bit of an idea of some of the companies we work with, both locally and abroad. As you'll see there as well, not only do we work in New Zealand, but we also stretch out into our neighbors in the Pacific. And the reason a lot of our clients do engage with us is whether it's to do with building relationships and people skills, some of those critical skills that businesses need, whether it's about delivering presentations, taking leaders, building their capability, whether it's a sales team, looking at how we drive revenue, growth, and put money onto the bottom line. Regardless of what we've usually got a curriculum that drives results and puts money onto the bottom line for businesses. And as I say, we've been around now for a wee while here working in New Zealand, from basically Auckland through down to Dunedin, and stretching out into Fiji at the moment, into the Pacific. So this evening, I just wanted to talk a little bit about this concept of culture and what its impact might look like. Talk a little bit about some of these key elements and look at ways we could develop that and some of the tools that leaders have at our disposal to create greater culture, as well as we're going to talk about a couple of other lenses. We'll talk about the lens of engagement. We'll talk about a lens that we can look through maybe about resilience, and also around a lens of psychological safety and how to drive that. So in the scheme of things, what is culture? Basically, we condense it down as multiple descriptions, multiple ways of interpreting culture. But one of the simplest ones is this is who we are, and this is how we do things around here. In other words, it sets the benchmark, it sets the tone for everybody in the organization. When people arrive in the morning, we know organizations have a vision. It says, this is where we're going. If we're like culture says, this is how we get there, and this is what we do getting there. It's incredibly powerful if we get this right. It affects just about everything that we as leaders do in an organization. Not only about how we do things, but also how we set our strategy, how we make decisions. It also influences our attitude of our teams towards not only the clients, but also towards that of the leadership within an organization. And also sets up the template for how the teams inside a company interact with each other. It also determines how they see themselves and how they fit into our team, fit into the greater world. Culture has been accused of many things, but it is one of the most powerful things to drive performance. Many people say it's now accounting for about half the difference in operating profit of any organization. And a lot of research and surveys that have been put together, not just by us, but this was the landmark study out of Harvard University. 50% or more would leave their current job for an entity that has a more positive culture. It's one of the things that we're starting to see underlying at the moment in this great resignation that's kicking in, that's moving around a place. One of the drivers is the culture of an organization. We're all familiar with the shifts and changes, and we'll talk a little bit more about those, particularly the work from home and the work-life balance model. Because it sounds an easy thing to build, but it's under pressure right at the moment. Many organizations have spent years developing a culture, only to find that the impact of COVID and the changes in the marketplace now are undermining it. There are complications as we get in this hybrid working environment. Some people are working from home, some others aren't. There's obviously an economic impact and the financial strains. But there's also a raft of things coming through as we start to talk, and we see these tensions over gender and racial inequity and injustice. And there's a whole raft of things that are impacting it. The uncertainties about market sectors is a powerful one about how do we rebound? What's the culture we're setting up to work with our people, especially about how this is going to rebound after COVID, after the economic side, when we're looking at supply chain issues. There's a whole raft of things that are putting it in there. So what are some of the tools we can develop? What can we do to create this culture? And we want to focus really on well-being today. I just want, culture is such a big, multifaceted conversation, but just to try and hone it into well-being. And as I say, we're going to look at it through a couple of lenses. The first lens I want to pop on the table, I'm sure we've all heard this term before, is that the term of engagement, employee engagement. And again, multiple definitions, but a simple one is the emotional and intellectual commitment of our people to deliver high performance. One way to look at engagement is we can employ somebody and we can pay them $1 and we can buy these. Pick something up, move it from A to B, move it around with your hands. Brilliant stuff. That's buying their body, buying their time. But engagement goes a little deeper than that. Engagement's all about how do I buy these and how do I get this? So in other words, how do I get them to bring their brain to the table to start thinking? But then finally, the last part of the equation is I want to buy these, I want to get this, but how do I get their heart? How do I get their passion and their drive to deliver that high performance above and beyond, not just today, but every day without us being around? And to have a look at the structure of how we do that, it's funny enough, it's about an emotional connect. If we follow and map out the employee experience and look at the emotions that lead into engagement, the first facet, funny enough, of creating an engaged employee is their relationship with their direct report, their manager above them, who they directly report to on a day-by-day basis, is the #1 driver in employee engagement. It's only through that relationship and that trust and that respect they build with their immediate manager that an employee or a team member will develop a belief in where the senior leadership are talking. Where are they talking? Where are they taking the company? What's their vision? What's the direction? What do they want? It only comes through that relationship and that connect with that immediate manager. Once they've got that, then they move into the next phase where they have that pride, that belief and that pride in the organization that then really starts giving us that extra effort. The bottom two are becoming more and more important. We started to see a shift, and that shift really started to kick in around about 2015, 2016. And it was started to be driven by the millennials and the Gen Z, where there was more of a requirement of a balance with personal life and a shift in the work environment. One of the things we have noticed, especially around engagement, is as a result of COVID, everybody now is talking about this. Everybody's looking at the work environment, a hybrid working place. Everybody's looking about that balance with personal life. And I'm sure we've all heard the story of Elon Musk as we've come back out of lockdown, he issued the mandate to his entire workforce that, we've got the bricks and mortar. You all now are required to come back and work full time in our business. I'm not sure whether you're all familiar with that, but that was the edict. As a result of that, he lost approximately 40% of his staff within 7 days. We're seeing the same impact here in New Zealand with organizations that we're talking to. And again, it's just how do we create this balance between personal life and this work environment in our new hybrid world? But as we say, these are the employee experience, but how does it relate to engagement and this emotional side? Well, if we get all of these things right, our people and our team feel valued, they feel confident, they're empowered, but more importantly, they feel connected. If we get those four emotions in play, we will drive employee engagement. But again, if we have a look at the first driver, this relationship, it's got to be founded and connected on trust and respect. So how common are these trusted relationships? How common is this first box? How common is building this relationship with this direct manager? Well, when we've done our surveys in 2020 and we started looking across multiple countries, the feedback for us came through loud and clear that about 30% only agreed that positive and trusting relationships were the norm among people they worked with. Unless that relationship's there with their leaders, there is no trust, there is no credibility, there is no respect. We think that, as a team member, we're the leader, we're the manager, we should be respected. Yeah, well, we will be for a moment in time. When we're introduced and we come on board as a team and they say, this is the managing director or the CEO, or this is the boss, we'll respect them for a little while. And it's only through their actions and how they behave and how they carry themselves will that respect be earned. Through that, then the credibility gets built, and via that becomes trust. It's only through these three factors, trust, credibility, and respect, will we start to drive engagement with our people. If we have a look then at how to do this, let's have a look at some tools to handle this. Mr. Carnegie, when he started his research work, which is the foundation of just about everything that's built on the human relations and developing people through some of what we're classing as the more essential skills. He broke it down into a simple pyramid, and he said that if we get the relationship right as a leader, if we build and enhance those relationships, we develop the rapport and the trust that's needed rather than indifference, where we end up with people that just turn up and they don't care. Funny enough, now when people reflect back onto the work that Mr. Carnegie was doing, he was actually pioneering the way in engagement research. Once we've got that relationship built, we can influence them to cooperate with. If we don't build that foundation, we don't get that right, the only leverage that leaders have is compliance. The do this or else model. Compliance has to have embedded in it a threat, and we all know that that doesn't motivate people for very long indeed. And funny enough, if we get all these pieces in play, having to deal with problems and change their attitudes and behaviors doesn't happen very often, which is why what we call the leadership piece at the top isn't needed that often. So Mr. Carnegie's research work started out, and he started looking at what were the pillars? What are some of the foundation pieces that successful leaders all apply? In fact, he was one of the first people that set about investing in studying best practice. He started to have a look around and interview people who were exceptional at leadership. And he came down and boiled it down and said, what were some of the key tools? What were some of the key skills that these people were applying? And out of those, from the base of the pyramid, the foundation, if you like, if there are anybody here in construction, we all know the importance of a foundation. We get that right, we can go as high as we like. These were the 9 foundational pillars that Mr. Carnegie uncovered as best practice. Now, feel free, this is the little book I've got here, the Golden Book. You feel free to download a free copy of this. It's at dalecarnegie.co.nz. But they identified 9 key pillars. If we want to build a relationship with our people, don't criticize, condemn, or complain was the first tool. Basically, this is not about people making mistakes or doing things wrong. If we're building a relationship of trust and respect, it doesn't matter what's happening. They don't want to hear us as leaders basically moaning and complaining and being grumpy all the time. If the economy is bad, the economy is bad. They know it just as much as we do. An example of this is, as we say, this is about building relationships. Imagine being at a barbecue and your drink's empty, you're making your way back over to go and get yourself another drink or a beverage, and you bump into somebody and all that person's doing is complaining and moaning, worrying about the weather, talking about the economy. Most of you would just bypass them completely, go get a drink and keep as far away from it as possible. As Mr. Carnegie rightly said, if we want our people to build a relationship with us, we've got to engage them and want them to come with us rather than creating a barrier for them. They're the 9 of these 9. If we have a look at them, they're very powerful tools, but none of them really sit there and scream, this is unheard of, this is unknown. Be genuinely interested in our people. Funny enough, we think our people are going to be interested in our business, but they'll only become interested in our business once they know that we're interested in them and how we fit into the picture. Tools like using their name. Their name is their badge of identity. If his name's John, it's not mate. Use their name, just simple stuff. Talk in terms of the other person's interests. Too often we hear business owners and leaders talking about the problems associated with the business. The economy is down, our pipeline's struggling, the supply chain's in trouble, the economy's this. We don't often hear them talking about what's happening in our team's world, what's happening at home for them, what's happening with their children as a result of schools being closed, what's happening in their world as a result of the costs going through the roof. It tends to be a one-way conversation. And again, this is just about how we engage with our people to build relationships. There's 3 that I wanted to highlight, and it's 3 particularly at the moment, especially around building that culture. How do we make people feel valued and connected? Create a culture where honest and sincere appreciation is given. When people do things, tell them they're doing well. Too often we're focused on when things go wrong, but what are they doing well? Another great tool is principle number 4, become genuinely interested in them. Not just as an employee, but what's going on in their world. And to help us do that, to be a good listener and encourage them to talk about themselves. So some simple tools that will help us from that engagement side really start to build that foundation that's needed to start moving a culture forward. The second tool I'd like to briefly touch on today is a thing called psychological safety. And that's an interesting concept because this relates to how well a person feels if they take a risk. How will they be seen by the management? How will they be seen by their peers? Will they be treated in a good light or a bad light? Would they be seen as incompetent? How are they going to be seen? And there are many ways to assess psychological safety, but I'm just going to bring up 9 signs now. And these are 9 general signs in a business that if we read through them and we start saying, yes, we're seeing some of these things, then maybe psychological safety is not as good as we'd like it to be. So let's just take a moment now as I bring these up, just to read through them for ourselves and just make a note. Are we seeing any of these signs around our organizations? Let's say, just take a moment to read through those. So these are the 9 signs that have been identified, as I say, as maybe raising a flag or just raising a mark. If we've got 2 or 3 of them in play, yeah, maybe there's something that's going on as a culture underground. Maybe it's a subculture that's being developed. And how do we deal with that? But how to deal with it, first thing we need to understand what we're talking about around psychological safety, because there are multiple facets to this. And there are 4 primary stages. Timothy Clark, who's probably the leader in studying psychological safety, put together his research and looked at it in this light. He said there were 4 stages. There was what's called inclusion safety, learner safety, contributor safety, followed by challenger safety. And it's a stage that our people go through. And we like to look at it slightly different. We'll add in an extra phase here, because to become inclusive, prior to inclusion, there has to be exclusion. So we end up at our first stage where we have what we call exclusion, and it's only through that relationship, through that engagement, through that trust, that they will move across into inclusion safety. So what we mean by inclusion safety is that they feel safe to be part of the team. They feel safe in the organization, and they are included. Once they've moved from that inclusion into that inclusion safety, once they've come across that threshold, we then quickly need to move them to the second phase, where they're feeling safe to learn. You know, they're open to new ideas. They want to and willingly accept the changes that are happening on, and they're open to new ideas. As we move through that now, they move into stage 3, which is what we call contributor safety. So contributor safety is a place where it's not just about their hands and actually contributing to the bottom line of the business, but it's where they're supported and they're encouraged to take their unique sets of skills and their talents, and they're allowed to use them in a meaningful way that personally satisfies them while delivering outcomes. So we employ them, they all come together, they have their own unique sets of skills, and we empower them to use that. But those 3 boxes in the middle of power, whilst they're powerful, that's just about everyday operation. The exciting threshold is between 3 and 4, and we term this the innovation threshold. At the moment, everything's been done as per, but we all know that we need people to take risks, because without risk, there's no growth, and any new innovation comes out of challenging the status quo and the norm. How do we get our team now to feel safe to challenge that? How do they get beyond this contributor safety, just working and turning and thinking? How do we get them to challenge the status quo to make sure they can come up with as many ideas to make things better, to drive money on the bottom line, and to think now collaboratively and focus on what's possible? Because this is where the businesses will harness their creativity and the potential, not just the individual, but if we do this on a team basis, how we can create a culture of innovation in an organization. A simple example of what we mean by this, by psychological safety, is we were doing a piece of work in the Hawke's Bay, and it was an organization that they were harvesting fruit, packing them, and they had a piece of equipment that manufactured the purple trays. I don't know whether you're familiar with them. It's a paper mache tray. It's a purple tray. And when they've picked the fruit, they pop that on and it goes into the supermarkets. And we were running an innovation session because this machine only ran 3 months of the year. And what else could we do with it? And we'd got people safe. They were feeling confident in the team. And one young lady who was out of the front office said, what would happen if we made egg cartons? Freedom of thought, free thinking, came up with the idea, said, what would happen if we make egg cartons? First thing the head of the engineering department said was, no, can't be done. It's not possible. Never made egg cartons, never likely to make egg cartons. Machine can't do it. From that point on, there was no further conversation from that young lady. As you can imagine, she'd been shut down. Now, all of a sudden, her ability to challenge the status quo disappeared. You could even say for the rest of the meeting, she started to feel excluded. Fortunately for that company, though, one of the young guys in the engineering department had a bit of a shine for her. And during the break, made a couple of phone calls, came back in just after lunch and said, you know what, for about $600, we can create a die. We can get a company just down the road to make us a die. And we can convert this machine to making egg cartons for probably no more than $1,100. As a result of that one conversation, this company is now manufacturing egg cartons. They run that for 9 months of the year. In fact, some years when we talk to them, it's a little embarrassing to shut things down and go back to making packaging for apples. So again, how do we make sure that we create this safety? How do we create people so that they can challenge the status quo? But how common is it? How common is psychological safety? Well, only 1 in 4 people that we talk to agree that they're encouraged to express ideas and opinions. The other 3 have the idea that it's just head down, bum up, just keep going. And almost 40% are either neutral or disagree that the leaders make it safe for them to experiment and learn from mistakes. This is the way we do it around here. Don't rock the boat. Come in and do as you're told. So what are some of the tools to help us as leaders create this? Well, funny enough, the first one that we talked about in building relationships kicks in here as well. Criticizing, condemning, complaining does nothing but shut people down. It disengages them. We won't get them into this creative space. One of the things that leaders need to do is, if we're wrong and we made the mistake, we should admit it. One of the things that says to people is, hey, it's safe to make mistakes so long as we learn from them. Other people have an idea, show them respect, let them explain it, let them talk it out. Show appreciation for their unique contributions. If they challenge the status quo, whether it's right or wrong, we might have tried it in the past, but they aren't aware of it. Congratulate them for thinking outside the box. Encourage them to do it again. And funny enough, if we want them to feel safe and contribute, let them do all the talking. Ask them questions, let them talk, and funny enough, they believe it's their idea. They just might surprise us with some of the stuff they come up with. We start to create a culture where it's theirs. They're contributing, they're looking forward, and they're getting excited about what they can do with the business. See, feeling valued, connected, and empowered matters. People who consistently feel valued, employees who are connected to the team, connected to the culture, connected to the values of an organization. They also feel empowered. They feel released and let go. And as I say, challenge that status quo. Ask themselves constantly, what can we do better? How can we improve this organization? And the beautiful thing then for us as leaders is all we have to do is let them go. An analogy I often use when I'm working with teams, especially around leadership, is that leadership's like carrying jelly. Imagine we've got a huge jelly. We want to move it from A to B. Giant, big party jelly wobbling around on the table. Natural tendency is to go hold and grab a hold of it. So we go and we grab it and we try to pick it up. We try to control it. We try to move it. All that happens is the natural tendency as we start to lose control is to grab tighter and tighter. The harder and harder we grab the jelly, the more mess it makes, the more it breaks apart, the more it falls over, till eventually it's a mess. And all we end up with is a little bit of jelly in our hand. That's about controlling. If, however, on the other hand, as leaders need to do, we hold the jelly and support it. We pop it on the palms of our hands, and as it moves, we guide it and we steer it. We can take a large jelly and we can move it from A to B quite comfortably. So as leaders, sometimes we've just got to remember to be doing that with our people and create a culture of support and guidance rather than one of control. But if we've got these people feeling valued, connected, and empowered, they become highly resilient. And one of the things that's happening in our marketplace today, as we're seeing all the challenges, is people need to develop this capability, this ability to bounce back. Resilience refers to our team's ability to overcome challenges and to recover and learn from them. But what underpins all of these are attitudes and a mindset that is primed to succeed, and having a positive and confident attitude in their abilities. Again, this is how it's developed by our team. So if we have a look at how this pulls together, because this is our final lens, we want to have a look through around building this culture of well-being. How do we build this team? See, resilience for individuals improves their performance and effort at work. It changes their attitude around job satisfaction. It also changes their attitude about whether we want to stay, whether we want to remain in this organization, or whether the grass is greener someplace else. And we also know it reduces stress and improves their mental and physical health. But from a team's perspective, it's powerful too, because if we have a resilient team, then the whole team's performance rises. We create more cohesion and greater cooperation. And from a company's point of view, agility, the ability to think outside the box, to challenge the norm, to be that innovative entity with a capacity to act goes through the roof. And at the same time, our employee engagement metrics, our profitability, retention, and productivity all increase too. Another lens, another way to have a look at resilience is this way. So how do we develop it from an organizational point of view? Well, we need to share the purpose. We need to share the vision, the culture, and the values of what we stand for with our entire team. One of the things that we're seeing coming through more and more as we've gone into this hybrid workplace, what are the resources like they have at home? We're amazed. We're talking to a group of business owners last week. Employees and team members. And they were saying that, some of them were still saying that when they're working from home in this hybrid world, they're still working from a laptop computer at the kitchen table. If we've now got a culture of an environment where we're working in a hybrid world and 2 days or 3 days a week, they're working from home, what's the resources they're like at home? Have we taken the time to equip them? Or are we just sending them out with a laptop and, just expecting them to do stuff based on that? Have we got a culture where learning, going and growing and developing is embedded? From a team's point of view, this psychological safety, this trusted relationships, what we call social intelligence is key. And then from the individual, how do we develop a positive and confident attitude? So as we start to look at resilience, social intelligence, funny enough, is one of the key things that underpins it. So social intelligence, what do we mean by that? Well, simply, it's how do people deal with challenging social contexts? How do we talk about others' concerns and feelings and emotional states? How do we know what to say and when to say it, how to say it in order to build and maintain these relationships with others? Or doesn't it matter? See, if we want to build a culture that's focused on people, then we need as leaders to develop our ability to have these conversations. So much easier to hide behind numbers, but we also know the problems and the challenges from a culture point of view that brings. But if we do develop resilience and we build our people, highly resilient employees are more likely to go above and beyond. They'll be relatively free of stress. They'll be more positive towards change, and they'll be more actively engaged. And there's more when it comes to payoff, because as we finish up, payoff and payback, I don't know about for you, but that's really where the rubber hits the road from a business point of view. What's in it for the business? They're twice as willing to consistently give their best efforts at work. They are also less likely to be looking for a job elsewhere. One of the biggest challenges that businesses are talking to us about today is, how do I find people? And then how do I keep the ones I've got? They're significantly more likely to be open to change. Significantly more likely to be open to being innovative and challenging the status quo. One of the other interesting aspects as we start to look at how do we tip the balance for this. So how do we find ways to balance this, the job demands and the resources? I mean, we can reduce demands on people where possible. We still need to gain outcomes. And how do we increase the resources? You know, whether they're tangible ones and, funny enough, intangible ones. How do we align our purpose with the things they need? How does that vision kick in? I mean, funny enough, as we start talking about vision, you know, it's hard to believe in 2022, we're still engaging with companies that tell us things like their vision is to increase shareholder value. I haven't yet met an employee or a team member that ever woke up in the morning, feet hit the floor and their eyes flew open and they clapped their hands and jumped out of bed and said, "Whoa, I'm looking forward to today. I can't wait to just drive shareholder value for our organization." What is it that they're trying to achieve? What's our vision? What's our purpose? What are our goals? How do we create a culture of learning? How do we create a culture where people turn up eager to learn, willing to do things, willing to challenge that status quo? See, if we have a look at the growth cycle and the development of people as they move through, every one of our people that we employ is skillful people. Every team member is skillful. They come to the table with a skill set. But the market changes, and the market changes rapidly for some people. Sometimes the market can change overnight. Heck, the world can almost seem like it changes overnight. We're going to be trucking along quite nicely, and then all of a sudden, hey, tomorrow we're going back into lockdown and you can't play anymore. Everyone has to go home. So the marketplace shifts. So for anybody to change and adapt, the first thing they've got to do is they've got to develop the right attitude. So if we've got the right attitude, we can change people, we can learn, they can adapt, they can do everything we need them to do. But typically we see three types of attitude in an organization. The first attitude we see is that of a learner. That learning attitude where they're willing, they're able, they're eager, they're excited, they want to challenge things. But after a while, something changes. And we start to see people drifting back into what we call vacationer mode. They just cruise. That energy disappears, that eagerness drifts away. And it's back into, I'll just turn up and I'll start to do the bare minimum. I come in just late enough and I leave just early enough and I do just enough to get by during the day. The third attitude that we often see drifting in is that we call a hostage style attitude. And we see these in a morning tea, around a water cooler or at a coffee machine. And all they do is they grumble and complain. They tell all the bad stories. They'll tell everybody that the economy sucks. They'll tell everybody that this bad thing happened and they read this negative article in the paper. And all they're doing is they're trying to create a culture that supports their opinion. So one of the things as leaders that we've got to do is we've got to constantly be aware of this cultural dynamic that's taking place. Little subcultures popping up from time to time, little negative groups turning up where we're looking at all the things that are wrong. But if we get our team with the right positive mindset, we get them into this learning attitude and we create this learning culture. While we've got that positive attitude, the best way to keep it is to keep growing them. Teach them new things, give them new knowledge, give them new information, give them new tools, and then allow them to develop a new set of skills. Funny enough, when leaders start to do this, they start to realize just how quick they can move people through this learning cycle. And then we start to create this culture of growth and learning. We need to demonstrate this social intelligence, making people feel valued. It's one of the things that we don't teach people enough of. We go, these are the soft skills. No, I would argue that these are the essential skills. These are the essential skills that leaders bring to the table that create engaged employees that go above and beyond. And these are the tools that build people's positivity and confidence in the business, confidence in the market, but more importantly, confidence in their leadership. So we as leaders, it's our function to create culture, and we just set the tempo and we set the tone. If we focus on numbers, we create a culture that's interested in numbers. If we're interested in people, we create a culture that's interested in people. So our challenge to us as we leave today really is, what are we going to do? What kind of culture do we want? And what kind of steps are we prepared to take to tip the balance of culture in our favor? So team, thank you for your time. I really do. And I'm sure that there's a few questions lying around. And one of the things I said to the team is I'm quite happy at the end here to throw this open to you guys for a 5 or 10 minute Q&A. We can talk about the research, maybe talk about some of the challenges that you're seeing, maybe stuff that's happening in your world that you'd like to have a chat around. And I'd be only to have an open the floor up to do that now. So please feel free to either jump online and audio, or I don't know whether we've got a chat room rocking and rolling.
I think people can make the questions now. Well, thank you for the presentation. It has been very insightful and thought provocative. I think it's very interesting. So let's see if anyone has a question. Mike?
Hi.
Sorry, before Simon, I don't see the people because we are in this presentation mode. If you could stop presenting.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's come back to the big screen. Cool.
Great. So go ahead, Mike.
Simon, one of the difficulties I hear of and have experienced is, as a business owner, you want to change your culture. You have a culture that you desire, yet you can't change culture overnight.
No.
What is your comments around that or thoughts?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it is. We've all got a culture that we'd love to have, and they drift and do things. How do we change it? Well, funny enough, one of the things that we've been working with some of our clients around is going back to the basics with the team, pulling everybody together and basically talking about who we are and where we want to go. Let's go back to the basics and say, what values do we as a company want to hold? And starting from that point, have that conversation, get the whole team involved in it, and then have them start to redefine the vision, allow them to start creating that. We can guide them, but it really needs to be, and it's amazing what starts to pop out. And from that foundation, then we can start looking at how we start building that culture and start shaping it and redesigning it. But it's that team collaboration. How do we get everything moving in the right? Yeah, we can influence it, obviously, because that's our role as leaders. But once they own it, they're going to start driving it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen, I think you had a question in the chat box. Do you want to tell it? Or should I?
No, that's fine, Alfredo. Thank you, Simon, for that presentation.
Thanks,
Once
Stephen.
you've made the steps, as Mike has just referred to create a culture in an organisation, how do you measure progress from day one to day X, when you would ideally be approaching something that looks like the culture you aspire to?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Stephen. Thank you. And it is how do we measure culture? It's definitely not the easiest thing on the planet, because too much of culture tends to, how we measure it is on gut feeling, really. We can look at metrics for employee engagement, employee satisfaction. But sometimes it's just having that transparent and open conversation. When we set the values, we set the vision, we talk about the type of culture we want. Sometimes it's bring the team around the table together, have another conversation with them. Maybe in that conversation, ask the team to score us on a scale of 1 to 10. We said 3 months ago we were starting to move towards this culture. These were going to be our values. How do you see us working them? How do you see us living them? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being where we're there, 1 being we've moved nowhere, and be courageous with the answer. Another way could be, we've seen companies do this as well. Catch each other living out the culture and the values, and have a system where people can recognize each other for doing that. I'll go back and say, maybe on an email system to somebody in the admin. I've seen Stephen this week living out the culture of an organization in this way, and I'd like to acknowledge him for it. And just something as simple as that can really start to shift things around. And
how would you deal, Simon, with the outliers, the people that are deliberately anti the culture and become quite toxic within an organization? How do you deal with that sort of person?
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Carnegie came up with that, and they were the top. They're the top of the pyramid. If we go back to that little pyramid, how do we change people's attitudes and behaviors? How do we move them around? Well, first things, obviously we've got to respect that they have a different of opinion, and that's okay too. We've all got opinions on things, but we've got to win them either to our way of thinking or help them one way or another to leave. That's, if we're serious about culture and we're serious about creating it, if we're putting everybody on the walker, we're either all paddling together, we have to make a call. We're all on the same journey here. Are we all going in the same direction, or are we got people just trying to paddle backwards? It's not fair on the rest of the team to have these people on board. If we as leaders can't turn it around, then sometimes we have to have that tough conversation. But there are tools that we can use. One of the great things is they're not necessarily wrong. They just don't necessarily see through the same lens we do. You know, too often we want to point out that someone's wrong, and we just end up in an argument. I don't know about you, but if someone wins an argument, someone loses. So ultimately, nobody wins. So we don't really want to go into that fight. And sometimes, if we build that relationship, we can get the information on the table. We can talk to them. You know, we can respect their opinion, but then sometimes we have to, just lay it on the line. Just try to understand where they're coming from. And funny enough, though, if we find if we go through this process of getting the team involved, if we take, for example, if we have the All Blacks or a high performing sports team, doesn't matter who it is, Team New Zealand, the Silver Ferns, whatever, they have a culture. And if a team member, if we bring someone new into the team and they don't fit the culture, it's usually not the management that has to get rid of them. It's usually not the management that puts the word on that says you're not fitting in around here. Funny enough, it's usually the team. So sometimes, as well as leaders, we can rely on our team a little bit more, those ones that are around us, to sometimes deal with these outliers. And sometimes these outliers are some of that could be our rock star. because sometimes they're off doing their own thing, and we've just got to allow the team sometimes to just slowly work with them and bring them back on track.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Other than the desperate one, is the bar open?
I have one question, though. So you have been talking about the culture and the big resignation and how improving the culture helps, I suppose, to retention. So what is the improvement that you have seen? Just some example or your experience about retention, having the right culture.
There's multiple examples around the place, both here and internationally, of organizations when they create a culture that focuses on people, not only in retention of staff, but also of bottom line performance going up. Numbers and focusing on those they will give us an outcome. I mean, if we have a look at GE under Jack Welch, for example, focusing on numbers gave them quite a positive result. Bottom 20% performers, you're all fired. Only going to talk to the top 20%. They're going to be my stars. They're all we're focusing on. So everybody was, to keep their job, had to focus on being in the top 20%, or at least not in the bottom 20%. It's the old, I don't have to run faster than the lion, I just have to run faster than the person next to me. And that does create an outcome, but is that a significant one? If you track GE through Jack's time and tenure, the returns, they weren't that much greater than what everyone else on average was taking in the stock market. But then if you look at entities like Amazon, or you look at entities like Google, and even to a point Microsoft now, as you start looking at the collaboration of teams, and you start tracking how things like Project Aristotle are working, where it's all about everybody said it wouldn't work. We create these lovely environmental spaces where people just hang out, play table tennis, and become creative. We're starting to see the share value skyrocket, and retention of staff. It's phenomenal.
That's a great analogy. Bear Stearns was exactly the same. And where are they now?
Yeah.
Sustainability, I think, is the word.
Yeah.
Creating a sustainable business.
That's it. Yeah. And the thing is, the people that we have, that's our greatest asset. We've talked about it. And I think one of the things that we're seeing with this great resignation is Yeah, the businesses, there are, you know, we talk about the great resignation. There are businesses that aren't suffering with it. And, you know, we look at those businesses and, you know, they tend to be the ones that are walking the talk, that really are showing that their people are the greatest asset. And they have that culture that looks after them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm conscious about the time, but we still have one last question.
Yeah.
So Russell, go ahead, and then we will finish the call.
Hi, Simon. Thanks for your presentation. It was fantastic. I just recently been running this strategic sort of program with a client, and we, you know, one of our critical success factors was around people, but we sort of struggled to we wanted to put a goal in place that we were all going to aim for, and, you know, NPS scores and retention numbers and everything else is all well and good, but it was really quite hard to such an intangible concept thing. Drives me crazy. Got any ideas? Can you fix it for me, please?
Yeah, I mean, I love the NPS score. Yeah, we everybody uses them as a metrics, and it comes down to the leading questions. You ask a question, you get whatever answer you want out of them. So, but how do you measure success from a people? You know, you can talk about engagement scores. That's a powerful metrics for measuring employee satisfaction. But one of the best things we found is, if we're going to do this, you need to make whatever it is consistency. Take the same metrics and measure it every 3 months. If you're measuring engagement, we do an engagement score once a year. Well, that's okay. That's picking an annual trend. But if we really want to focus on something, if we're going to do a survey, as you say, to get these success factors from a people side of view, you know, maybe we need to do this more frequently. Maybe we create an internal system or a survey that asks the questions that are interested. Yeah, you know, we can talk about all kinds of stuff. You know, what's their engagement scores? You know, how do they fit? We have we spend a lot of time with our clients building assessments for them to measure this. You know, and again, how does it score? We've just done one with a client here in Auckland. We run an assessment. We call it a strategic needs analysis, and it's absolutely confidential. There are 7 health indicators of the business we run. You know, what's the health of their leadership, their communication, their people, their innovation? How do they score compared to the national average? How do they score compared to a global average? Are there any alarm bells that need to go off? And again, one of the things with that is, you know, making it confidential, ensuring that, you know, what people say doesn't get back to them. You know, and that's, as I say, where we will run that. This is the second time we run it with this client. First time wasn't very good news for them. Well, you know, sometimes that's it. You know, sometimes that first conversation is a tough one. You know, funny enough, the first set of responses, you know, it takes an individual about 10 minutes to complete it online. It's completely anonymous, and they're entitled then to put in comments. And, you know, we took it back to the board, and we sat down with the 3 directors, and some of the comments were brutal. You know, some of the comments, the directors, we said, look, we're going to have to put some big boy pants on here, because we've got 5 comments coming from at least, we get a gauge. We knew they were from at least 4 different people. And it was the basic comment was 2 of the directors need to leave for the business to be successful. Another comments were the directors, while they're in the business, should stop arguing in front of everybody, and at least at some point in time have a unified direct approach to give us some confidence. Fortunately, 3 months later, that's moved around a little bit because they've done some work on it. But yeah, sometimes those results do take a little bit of courage to listen to.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Thanks, Simon.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Simon, for the presentation. It has been great. And thank you everyone for coming today. And I wish you a good evening. And well, see you next time.